Yeah, it is Mail It In Friday, brought to you by Boston Pizza. Weekends are better with fish bowls and frosty pints on a BP patio. Grab your sunscreen. Let's have a weekend. See you on the BP patio. Happy to see you on OverDrive again, my friend, Dave Feschuk. I am Brendan Dunlop, filling in for Brian Hayes. I'm very happy that we've had the wealth of topics to get to.
Yeah.
I did think in terms of baseball, we'd be talking about the Blue Jays in a much more favorable situation heading into a massive weekend in Boston. But that's not how the cookies crumbled for these Blue Jays, my friend.
No. Baseball's a tough game. Just ask Shohei Ohtani.
Oh, man, honestly. The tears, we were just speaking in the break here about, was it specific to the injury that night? Is it specific to the situation in life that he finds himself in?
Yeah.
I mean, they didn't move him at the deadline. The Angels had said long before the deadline, look, it's not happening. Does the team, is it him that believes that if they make the playoffs and they still got a shot, they're in a much better situation than they were 3 weeks ago when I was out there at Angel Stadium watching him pitch and lose to the Astros?
Yeah.
I don't think that them making the playoffs is good enough for him to stay. But maybe that's all they're looking for.
They're
Just
hoping.
get a wild card spot, and then we'll keep them.
Look, they're hoping for magic, right? Like, they're hoping for a miracle here is what they're hoping for.
Yeah.
Because they're going to need one. I mean, the way it's going. Like, again, that's the story of his career in as an Angel is, he has a start. Now, he has to come out of the game as a pitcher after 4 innings with some cramping. But he hits his 40th home run of the season, leading the major leagues in home runs, pitching like a Cy Young candidate, and they lose again.
Yeah.
Cade Marlowe hits a grand slam in the 9th, and the Mariners get by him. That's 3 straight losses after they decided not to trade him at the trade deadline. And you got to be thinking he's looking at it going, as much as he was on record saying he's happy they added, he's excited they want to go for it. It's the same old Angels.
Honestly, and minus the description that you just gave of the last 3 days, that you could be talking about any point in his tenure since he's been there.
That's been the punchline of his career, right? Like, it's just like the eternal tweet.
Man.
Ohtani has a great game, 2 home runs, gets the win, 9 strikeouts, they lose. I mean, I don't know if that actually happened. It feels like it did.
It does seem like there'd be a scenario where he got the W and yet still the Angels lost.
Yeah.
That's
He didn't get the
life.
win. You're right, but he pitched great.
No,
Pitched great, hits like Babe Ruth, and they lose.
There's a lot of should have been W's for him out there.
Amazing.
Joining us on the Maple Toyota Hotline is Steve Phillips, a W for us. He's the TSN MLB analyst, a regular on OverDrive. Steve, how you doing on this Friday, man?
I'm doing great. Good to be with you guys.
Always good to talk with you. I wish we were talking about the Blue Jays in a better situation heading to Fenway. Dave and I had a lot of conversations about how important this series was against the Orioles in combination, because if you could beat a team that you're looking up at, that gives you some confidence, something that the Blue Jays are clearly lacking. And now here we are at the end of this 4-gamer in which they dropped 3 of 4, wondering if this was maybe the most disappointing series of the season for Toronto so far.
Well, I mean, the one thing we know is they do not play well against the American League East. I mean, that's well documented, and for whatever reason within their division, they can't just seem to find ways to win games. And so they're dominant against everybody else. I think they're 52-27 against non-American League East rivals, but against the AL East, they just cannot find ways to get wins. I think they're like 8-23 or something like that. And so something's got to give, especially considering that you've got 2 teams behind you in the wild card race, both the Yankees and Red Sox, that are right on your heels if you're the Jays, and you've got games coming up against them. They're playing pretty good baseball out of the Red Sox. The Yankees are playing better. They beat Tampa Bay, then they beat Houston in back-to-back days, and so maybe they're starting to get right, and so the pressure's on. I mean, but the Jays they can't seem to get separation. They'll play really well for a couple days and then they give them back. And they'll play really well for a couple days and they give one back. And they just can't seem to just get that consistency to separate from everybody there. And the other thing, you got to look out for, here come the Seattle Mariners now too. I heard you guys talking about the Angels, who now are 4 games out of the wild card, and there's now 3 other teams in front of them, and then 3 more wild card teams in front of them. So the hole is getting deeper for them. And so, I think the Jays better shake themselves a little bit. And Boston has had it's funny because a year ago, what were the Jays? I think were 17-1 against the Red Sox, and now they can't seem to find a way to beat them this year.
Yeah, it's weird, Steve. I mean, look, if you're sitting in the executive suite, Steve, and you have sat in the executive suite, and you're watching these struggles, and you talk about how the Jays have got to shake themselves, do you as a GM at some point got to, feel like you have to shake it up with your levers that you can pull? I know the trade deadline just passed, but, the Yankees fired a hitting coach when they weren't hitting. Do is it too late in the season to make a move of that nature? Or what else can you do here when all these inexplicable things like, being 28th in batting average with runners in scoring position and not being able to beat an AL East team keep happening?
Yeah, I think it's really hard to do that when you're holding a playoff spot. I think that you run the risk of really disrupting it and causing bigger problems than that. So, it's one thing if you're out of it and you need to shake it up to try to spark it to see if you can't get back into the race. It's another one if you're in it, because I'm not going to take the chance that my move actually completely collapses, backfires, and then we start to really lose and can't deliver. So,
right.
I think it's too risky to do that right now. But the shaking up can be, what I would do as a general manager, I didn't go down there ever tell anybody to play anybody. I never told the manager who to put in the lineup. Never. I would just ask questions. I would just ask questions like what are, you almost play devil's advocate, just challenging the thinking to make sure that we're considering everything. And I'd have meetings with the staff to just talk it through. And, one of the things that always drove me crazy was when the staff seemed afraid to disagree with the manager. And which is when I did make changes, but I did that early in the season when we weren't really in the playoff race at that point, and it ended up working. I think we were 27-28 at the time in June, and I think it was 1998, and then we made the move to change hitting coach, pitching coach, bullpen coach, and then we went 40-15 over the next 55 games. And so, I think that getting independent thinkers is important. And being able to challenge each other in a way that nobody's, feeling like they're defensive about it, but we're just all trying to get to the answer that's best. And so that's what I found was the best thing for a general manager to do. And, I think the other thing is, when they sent Manoah to the minor leagues, I thought it was a statement. But then I thought that they gave some of it back when they brought him back too soon, I thought. Now, we'll see what he's going to look like after the next start. Remember, he came out after the hit by pitch last time. And, is that still lingering in his head? Is it in his mind at all? It'll be interesting to see how he bounces back mentally with everything, having had some time to flush it out. So, I think more than anything right now, the front office's job is to just challenge the staff and support the players.
Absolutely. And they have shown that they can support Alek Manoah, and they want to support Alek Manoah. They certainly believe in him. But I don't know if it's just me being half Portuguese and it's in my DNA to be a little more pessimistic than most people. I look at him on the hill tonight, starting this series that's very important for them. And I'm a little worried if I'm a Blue Jays fan that it's Alek Manoah tonight.
Yeah, I mean, I can understand it. Yet, he was okay before he hit Taylor Ward in the face with the pitch. And so it's going to be an interesting one. Look, the one thing I know is it's really hard to just fix something immediately. These things take some time sometimes, and it's hard to compete and get fixed during the season. It's just really hard because you're out there and you're trying to make the best pitch you can. Then emotions and energy get involved in it. Competitive get involved in it. You tend to forget about things, or you're overthinking about your mechanics, and you don't compete. And so there's so many different ways it can go. They need Manoah out there just competing. His slider is going to be critical. If he can command his slider, and if he, watching the game tonight, the thing to watch is when he misses with his pitches, particularly his fastball, is he missing up and into the right-handed hitter? That's where he hit Taylor Ward in the face. That's typically when Manoah's not right. It's because his body leaks down the pitching mound and his arm drags behind, and he can't get the arm in front, so the arm releases the ball up and into the right-handed hitter. He doesn't hold it and get it out in front to be able to extend to get it to the outer third of the plate. When he can only pitch to half the plate with his fastball and he doesn't command his slider, then he's in trouble. So the ability to throw the fastball outside and to be able to throw the slider, starting it on the plate and then breaking it off the plate where there's a decision that the hitter has to make is going to be critical for his success.
So the Blue Jays hoping to maybe shake up the offense with a call-up from AAA Buffalo. Steve, what do you know about Davis Schneider, who's obviously been hitting for some serious power down in AAA with 21 home runs for the Bisons?
So here's the thing. I love calling guys up. I love rewarding players, too. Now, look, he's just 24 years old and has certainly put together a very solid season. In fact, that's the car he's racing to the big leagues right now.
I was going to say, who was that?
House there. Yeah, that was Davis Schneider right there, racing to get to the big leagues right now. What I do like is that he's walked a lot. He seems to have plate control, right? A .416 on base percentage overall. Now, what I don't want is for there to be an expectation that he's a savior to the offense. because young guys, the young players and the old players are the most inconsistent ones, and he certainly has set up to succeed. He's been playing really well down at AAA, and so he's ready to step in and produce. But it's got to be in a low pressure, low expectation mode, and just hope that he adds. Because if that's the solution, then that's a problem, right? The keys have to be Springer, Bichette when he's healthy, Guerrero, Chapman, the Varsho's got to get it going. Those guys have to be the answer to the offense of this team. Now, Merrifield's certainly been great. And what Schneider does, it allows him to put Merrifield in the outfield a little bit and either spell Springer if he's still struggling, to give Varsho a day off against left-handed pitching, and to be able to allow them to mix and match a little bit better. And so we'll see. I mean, sometimes teams bring somebody up and they are the spark plug. They bring a different energy level, which everybody responds to, and it's refreshing. But it's awfully hard to have an expectation beyond just let's see what a young guy can do.
Yeah. What's your take, Steve? I've been reading some stuff that says that the gap between AAA and the majors maybe has never been bigger than it is right now. Do you buy into that?
Well, I think that may be the case, but it probably also means the gap between AA and the majors is as small as it's ever been. Because what a lot of teams are doing is AAA is the holding place for the journeyman, where they're guys who are your depth protection. They've been around, they've had cups of coffee in the big leagues. They're 28 to 31 years old, who are just competing. And if you need somebody, you've got a body there you can bring up and compete. But they're not necessarily somebody who's going to be an everyday player at some point. Sometimes, and look, I think it's worthwhile to promote prospects to AAA because at AAA there are some wily veteran journeyman pitchers who know how to toy with young hitters, to know how to get them to use their own aggressiveness against themselves. And I think there's something that can be learned from that. But at AA is where you got guys throwing 98, 99. AAA is where you got guys throwing, 92, trying to trick you a little bit. But I think it's important to get, be able to handle both of those. So, but I do think that listen, I mean, there are young guys coming to the big leagues and they're superstars right away. And it has created an expectation that if your young guy doesn't do it, then your young guy's not great. And it takes some time sometimes for guys to figure it out a little bit. Mike Trout took time before he figured it out a little bit, and it certainly has worked out okay for him, and many others have as well. So, we'll see how it goes. But I think that this is certainly a young guy with some upside offensively.
A lot of talk about the Red Sox, who seem to very much be ahead in the rebuild, much farther ahead than a lot of people would have expected, at least where they are at this point in August. How about the Yankees? Domingo Germán out for the season. He's going to go into alcohol rehab. The details of his blow up in the clubhouse, not very good, obviously. Did you ever deal with a player going through this in your career? And what do you think of the Yankees and how they might handle this situation going forward?
I dealt with players that had some emotional issues where maybe they were dealing with anxiety, depression, those sorts of things. And don't think we ever had anybody with a substance abuse issue that had to go get help for themselves. Although, listen, back in the day, both Darryl Strawberry and Dwight Gooden checked themselves in. They were certainly minor league teammates of mine at a time, and I was around the Mets organization at the time it's going on. And, I think that there's a level of compassion in professional sports, and certainly in baseball today, around mental health. We see a lot of players now going on the injured list that are dealing with mental health issues, and there's not the stigma that was once attached to it, with whether it's anxiety or whatever else, depression, whatever they're dealing with. And there's I think more of a level of tolerance and acceptance and understanding and empathy than we've ever had before. A few years back, CC Sabathia checked himself in to an alcohol rehab at the end of the season, and there are some who look at it and think, "Geez, not right. He's abandoning his team and everything else," but you are likely no good to your team when you're unhealthy in that way. And the personal health and well-being is certainly going to be more important for Domingo Germán or anybody else who's going through that than baseball at a given time. And so, I think that, certainly thoughts are out with him to go into recovery, get the help he needs, and try to get his career back on track again. And for the Yankees, they've got to regroup. And, sometimes those are things that pull people together a little bit in a clubhouse where, there could be some resentment towards somebody who had a blow up and acted out, right? An acting out moment in a clubhouse. But at some point during the course of the season, every single player manager, coach, clubhouse worker, trainer does something selfish. Everybody does something along the way. They're mad that they didn't get any hits even though the team won. They're mad that they got pinch hit for and the guy who pinch hit for him hit a base hit, and now they think their playing time is going to diminish. Another guy's mad that he's not being used enough out of the bullpen. Another guy's mad that he's being used too much. Everybody has something, and how that gets managed within the clubhouse, from player to player, from staff to player, within an organization, creates the energy and chemistry that exists within that cohesiveness that exists or doesn't exist within a clubhouse. And so, this will be something for the Yankees that can go either way. I suspect with Aaron Judge as their leader that they'll be able to pull this together.
What did you make of the Anthony Rizzo situation, Steve? Because it was kind of strange. Like, they talked about how, he wasn't sure what the problem was. I guess he had a collision earlier in the season with Soto. And ever since, he spoke about how he'd been feeling almost hungover when he hadn't been out doing the things that get you hungover. And suddenly they've come to the realization, no, he needs to be on the IL with a concussion symptom.
Yeah.
Kind of an odd situation. What'd you make of it?
It is. Yeah, it goes back to May 28th. He had a collision when they were playing the Padres on a pickoff play, and the throw went in, and his head hit the side of Fernando Tatis Jr.'s hip. And he did go through concussion protocol and testing at that point and cleared it. And so at that point, they thought, okay, well, it's not an issue moving forward. But it was an issue. And, what ends up at least that's what they think it stems from. I mean, it's obviously, that you can only sort of look back over time and look for cause and effect. But I think that, he was dealing with the inability to make adjustments and to speed himself up. There are times as a hitter where you're just behind everything. You're behind the fastball. And the solution is you got to get yourself started a little bit earlier, get yourself going. He said, I've been able to do that many times in my career, but I can't do it now. I just haven't been able to get caught up. And that's the when they did the testing again, the cognitive impairment that came through, most professional sports do impact testing, which is, mental cognition testing before the season to create a threshold to see where somebody stands, that if there is some issue that happens during the course of the year, that they can then use it to compare to where they were when they were in a healthy place. And they went back and did that. Again, after a long period of time, when he finally said he was foggy and just wasn't feeling right, and they find out that there is an issue there. And so they've got to back him off a little bit. Rest is usually the answer for that. Stay out of bright lights, no action, no activity. So it'll be interesting to see how quickly they can get him back, because he is a really important bat to that team when he's healthy.
He's important, and it's just not as predictable a recovery, which makes it further complicates their season a little bit. But wishing him all the best, and definitely will make for a very competitive end of the season if he can get back in the lineup. What'd you make of the activity we saw at the trade deadline? Maybe more so like what didn't happen. Dave and I were having this conversation where it seems like teams maybe aren't willing to take the risks for that third wildcard spot. It's not as much of an incentive for them to blow things up midway through.
What's amazing is that did anybody not watch last year when the Phillies were the third wildcard team and went to the World Series? I mean, if you're in the tournament, you've got a chance. And here's the thing. In the American League, if you're not going to be the top two division winners, you want to be the third wildcard team, because you draw the American League Central Division champion in that first round in the wild card round. It's going to be the Twins or the Guardians, and both of them are right around 500. That's where you want to be, is to go for that spot. So that's where I thought the Blue Jays were winners at the deadline. I wrote about it in my article. Was I liked the DeYoung move and the two bullpen moves that they made. I thought they were good moves. They filled needs. They weren't sexy. They weren't splashy, but they were necessary. But what was key for them, too, was the Red Sox didn't do anything. The Yankees didn't do anything. The Mariners traded away their closer. And you look at the Angels, and sure, they did some things, but, it's not enough. And they've got the hardest schedule remaining for the rest of the year. And so they're heading the wrong direction. The other thing is this. Ohtani's in trouble. The cramping for Ohtani that dates back to that doubleheader where they were told they were going to keep him. He went out through the one hitter against Detroit. It was 95 degrees with 100% humidity. Then in the doubleheader, he hits the 2 home runs and he's cramping up running around the bases. And he's had cramping since then. And then he couldn't pitch in the game yesterday because his middle finger and his hand was cramping. And this is an indicator for me that any general manager who has interest in signing Ohtani for the long term. So this cramping's not gone away. And my experience around this is when it starts, it's nearly impossible for it to stop.
Really?
Yeah. Oh, my boys are my example of it. They played football and they would have cramping issues, and they would drink until they were drowning themselves, and they would drink pickle juice, and they would do everything people would say to avoid cramping, and they would cramp again. And so Ohtani has said that it's not just his hands. He's been cramping. His whole body's been cramping since that time in Detroit. They've had him hooked up to IVs. They've been giving him all kinds of fluids. And the idea is, am I going to sign him to 10-year contract when the reality is, I didn't know that anybody's body could ever hold up to what he was doing, and he's been doing it, but now he's showing signs that he can't. And can I sign up for 10? What if next year, mid-season, the cramping starts again, and somebody says to me, what did you think was going to happen when he was cramping last year halfway through the season? If the obvious answer is, geez, what were you thinking? Then you can't sign him to a 10-year contract. And so if I were GM out there I'm going all in on Ohtani, now I'm really worried about it because nobody's body can do what he's asking his body to do. And his body's now rejecting what he's asking it to do.
You make a lot of good points. You always do, Steve. But what if his body's reacting to the stress of staying in that situation in Anaheim? What if it's what if it's the stress that he's going through, debating what to do with the rest of his career? Because he does hold the power for the next 10 years, and this is the result of what physical manifestation.
Made, by the way, he isn't staying there. There's no chance he's staying there because here's what we know: like he said through his interpreter, winning is the most important thing to me right now. Okay, they haven't been over 500 in any single season that he's been there in his career.
I know.
And here's the other thing to remember: he's making $30 million. If he's probably going to get 50 to 60 million. And if you can't win when he's making 30 million, when you can use the other 20 to 30 to support him with other players, when you pay him 50 to 60, you can't pay those other players and you're not winning with those other players surrounding him now. How can you sell that you're going to win later when you've got less money to spend on the supporting cast and you're not winning with them? And so I just don't see there's any way, if winning is any part of the top criteria for him, that he can go back there. The Dodgers will be in. They're going to match the money. They match the geography, and they give them a much better chance of winning than what the Angels do. And so do the Giants, who find ways to do it with a supporting cast that isn't sexy, but they've got a lot of good baseball players there. I don't think there's any chance. I think he's made the decision. He's not going back there. He may use them. And the other part is this. The owner's not in it for the long term.
Right.
The owner had the team up for sale last year. Then he pulled it off the market. But when you put it on last year, you think he's going to be around for 10 years? No. And so he's not going to be in on it for that long a period of time. And so does Ohtani want to sign there with an ownership group that's not going to end up being there in the future? And for him, there are going to be a lot of ownership-based decisions, not just GM-based decisions, that will impact the competitiveness of that team moving forward.
Steve, we were just talking about the big extension for Anthony Davis in basketball. The Lakers are going to pay him an average of $62 million through the length of the extension through 2028, and he's had availability issues, to put it kindly, nicknamed street clothes. If you're the GM thinking about Ohtani and you're seeing these early signs that, hey, he may seem like a superhuman, but he's human, and he's trying to do two jobs when nobody in the history of this game has been able to do two jobs. And he's got these cramping issues. Like, how do you go about weighing the risk of that? And how do you even deal with the problem of that scope?
Yeah, so remember, these decisions about whether to sign Ohtani is not a general manager's decision. It's an ownership decision because this is mortgaging the future of a franchise. When you give one player that amount of money, you give him control of many things. That was one of the things when A-Rod was a free agent that I was concerned about for myself personally, because one of the things that he wanted access to the scouting reports to know who were going to be playing around him in the lineup. He wanted to talk to the marketing department about how they were going to market him and how many billboards they were going to put up of him compared to Derek Jeter.
Right.
He wanted a tent to sell A-Rod apparel merchandise. He wanted an office in the stadium where his marketing guy could bring people in the clubhouse. He was going to take over. And I thought, I can't let one guy do that. And I can't let him be in charge. And you know what really reinforced it for me was about 2 years into his tenure down in Texas, Doug Melvin, who was an outstanding general manager, was out of a job. he was out because A-Rod was the guy in charge down there. And so
right.
Owners have to make these decisions. And I just think that they've got a lot of things they look at. Like, I think the reason they pulled him off the market for trade was the owner looked at it and said, I can make $20 million with him on my team for the last 2 months of the season. And if I'm not going to be here for the long term, what do I care if I can get prospects for him? Because I'm not going to be owning him when those prospects are going to become big leaguers anyways. Like, that's the logic that made sense to me, considering he had it on the market just last year. And so owners are going to drive this. And, many of them will stick their head in the sand. Doctors will weigh in. Baseball people will weigh in. But owners are going to make the decision about whether or not they're in on Ohtani.
Do you guys remember when there was the chatter that the Yankees should trade Jeter and move A-Rod to short? It wasn't a lot of people saying this, but you remember that chatter?
Yeah.
I remember I said this to an NYPD cop and having a baseball conversation as I was looking for directions. He almost arrested me. Talk about know your audience.
Yeah.
I really screwed up there.
It's funny because, when they got A-Rod, A-Rod's a much bigger guy than Jeter. But when I watched the game, Jeter's shadow was longer and bigger than A-Rod's. It was his team. You looked at him on the field and just Jeter was always the centerpiece of everything that was there. It was such an awkward, they were friends at once, and then it became somewhat awkward after that. And, for A-Rod, my sense of it is that, his biggest challenge has been when he dealt with the media is that when he got asked a question, he thought to himself, I wonder what they're asking me. I wonder what they want me to say. I wonder what they want to hear. And then he would do that calculation and he would guess wrong about what the people wanted to hear. And it always came across sort of like, huh, really? And kind of phony and not really as authentic. And Jeter was always authentic. He was brief, but he always gave an answer. He knew that you just needed a quote. He wasn't trying to do anything other than give you the stock answer. He wasn't trying to impress you with his smarts or anything else. And then when A-Rod hit rock bottom, right, the suspension from the game and everything else, and he was out of the game, for a while, it felt like he was being real and authentic. And then he got big again, right? He got J-Lo and he became big again, and now he's a star. And, when guys become big stars like that, they don't let us in for the real them anymore. But I think we got a glimpse of it out of A-Rod that was there for a bit and then it wasn't.
Steve, you're a star, buddy, and I love talking baseball with you. This was great, man. Thanks so much.
My pleasure, guys. Always happy to do it.
Have a great weekend.
All right, you too. Thanks.
Steve Phillips joining us on the Maple Toyota hotline. Build your next dream Toyota at Maple Toyota. Check out Maple Toyota's pre-owned inventory arriving daily. It's time to Toyota. Visit mapletoyota.com. A lot of good points with Steve. We'll pick that up on the other side. What you say, my friend? This is OverDrive on TSN2, TSN 1050, and the iHeartRadio app. OverDrive is brought to you by FanDuel, bringing you everything from the opening line to the final score. I like this selection, Luca. You've got Justin Bieber in my ear, admitting that sometimes you make mistakes. It's how I feel when I open a block with some soccer talk. I feel like that's how the audience is reacting. Like,
Don't feel that way.
Go.
You're a soccer guy. You can't apologize for that.
It's happening. Things are happening. It's a busy time.
Hey, man.
Soccer never ends.
Messi's a craze. You see the ticket prices in Dallas for his first road game as a member of
you were telling me.
Miami.
Let the people know how expensive this is.
$1,000 for the cheapest ticket in the place, and like multiple thousands for good seats. This is Dallas. 20,000 seats though. How many 20,000 seat arena? That's a pretty good place to see Messi.
Yeah, talk about intimacy.
Yeah.
It's not exactly a place like BMO with a roof that's got good sound. It's a surprising place for Texas where it gets really hot. It looks like and I bet you it was like a glamour high school football stadium.
Is that what it was?
That FC Dallas playing.
Right.
Yeah, I mean it should be a market in which they draw a lot and fill.
Not doing great.
They can fill Cowboy Stadium when Mexico plays, but they're not filling FC Dallas Stadium for an MLS game.
Unless Messi's
there. And it's a Leagues Cup game they got coming up this weekend in the Leagues Cup. Quick TFC news I'm reading on Waking the Red. They've got a new forward, man. Prince Owusu, 6'3" German striker. TFC have signed to score some goals.
Prince
Owusu.
All right.
It's his real name. It's a
great name.
They need some royalty. They need someone to come in and save them right now. I think 9 games left TFC's got in the season. It's 9 or 10. And you're just looking to finish with some positivity.
The last season.
You're just looking to lose as few season ticket holders as possible.
Is that what it is, basically?
That seems to be the feeling of the situation. I mean, no one thinks mathematically, if they win outright, they're in the playoffs.
Okay.
But no one thinks they're going to do that.
Right. They haven't shown any signs.
There's still a lot of movement to happen. Lorenzo Insigne and Federico Bernardeschi are still being rumored to move. That European transfer window closes on September 1st. Federico Bernardeschi
get some of that Saudi money for the TFC
could get some of that Saudi money, at least for Insigne. That's the rumor.
Yeah.
Bernardeschi's linked with going to Bologna in the Serie A. They finished 9th last year. Was also linked with Napoli, Serie A champions, but and Insigne's old team. Well, we'll have to see how that plays out. I wish we had more time with Steve Phillips in that last block. He hit some amazing points, man. I love that he brought up A-Rod and Jeter and what it's like managing big players like that. He seems dead set, that Ohtani is leaving, that there's not a chance. Yeah. I don't know if it's just me reading too much between the lines or trying to read too much between it, but it feels as though he's really torn, Ohtani. I don't think he knows.
Well, who knows? The one thing about Ohtani, we see the production, we see the mastery of the game on the mound and in the batter's box, but we know nothing about what he's actually thinking. Right?
I know.
He's speaking through an interpreter. B, he doesn't speak very often, and he doesn't really speak in depth about what his feelings are. We know he's tired of losing, but every athlete says they're tired of losing. Who'd say they're, I'm loving it. You can't say you're tired of losing. You're not tired of losing. So, but to me, the interesting part of that conversation was Steve saying, once you start cramping, and Ohtani's been cramping since that doubleheader in Detroit, maybe you don't stop cramping. That's concerning to me.
Yeah, I hadn't really thought about that, especially with something that seems treatable, right? It's different if you've got a guy that has a history of knee issues and he's done one knee bad and then less than a year later he does the other knee.
Yeah.
That's different. You're talking about, I thought cramping was something that you could treat and correct.
Right, drink some water.
Right.
Drink some Gatorade or whatever, your sports drink of choice. And some electrolytes, and maybe you get a good sleep, and you're good, right?
And hey, it could be a part of that. I mean, we take for granted what it must be like to have all of this, all this money. They got a set schedule. They know how far in advance the 162 games exactly where they're going to be. Figure out how to sleep. Figure out how to travel in the middle of the night. It's not that easy. it's hard for guys to play catch up.
Well, and as Steve says, no one in the history of the sport has really done what he's doing. So there's no precedent, right? To load manage this guy, and guess what? They're not load managing him because he's pitching like a starter and he's hitting like a slugger.
It's also though what he wants. It's not just that it's not like they're maxing him out because they think they have a chance to win.
Well, they stink with him doing both things. Imagine how bad they'd be if he only had one.
I can't actually imagine the scenario in which they lose him for nothing, right? If the belief is, maybe that's it. Does no one in that organization feel as strong as Steve Phillips that there's no chance of coming back?
Well, obviously.
They must think that he's coming back. They must feel as though if we get in the playoffs, man, now, that this will be enough. We just need to get in the playoffs this season.
Well, it's like Steve did say in our great interview with him that, hey, the Phillies, look at the Phillies last year. They snuck into the playoffs and made it to the World Series.
Yeah, that third wild card spot matters.
Yeah.
He made a good point.
Now, the fact that the Angels have lost 3 in a row since not trading Ohtani at the deadline, and now he's got cramping issues, and even though he did hit his 40th home run last night while cramping.
Right. That just feels like...
Can't be that bad.
But that just feels like that's what happens to the Angels. That's just on brand for them.
Yeah, for sure.
Be caught in this situation where, sucked into the moment. We got a chance. Look where we are. We're only 3 games out. There's 2 teams between us, and now here they are, 4.5 games out with 4 teams between them. I don't think it's happening for the Angels this year.
It's probably not, but unfortunately for them. But, that is interesting to hear Steve talk about a signing of that nature. And he brought up the A-Rod signing when he was GM of the Mets, and A-Rod ended up going to Texas and bringing up the complications that come with that. It goes above management into ownership. And with Ohtani, it's going to be an unprecedented number, you would assume, in terms of the annual salary, because you're essentially buying 2 players for 1.
I know.
But how do you kind of factor in that health aspect and the idea that this guy's doing something no one's ever done before? I mean, as much as Steve painted a negative picture on A-Rod, which I understand, because A-Rod was a prima donna and an entitled guy who wanted all those crazy things like his own A-Rod merchandise stand and on the rest of it.
He was a difficult player.
Played 162, an awful lot.
He did.
And after that episode with Steve Phillips and A-Rod demanding all those things, he won 3 MVPs.
Yeah.
1 in Texas and 2 as a Yankee.
He did deliver.
By the way, Jeter never won any MVPs. Although he did win a World Series MVP. So there is that. But,
Yeah.
So A-Rod produced now, perhaps with some assistance, that has tarred his career. But
There's a period in question, certainly.
right.
For Ohtani, and thinking about this next chapter for him, like someone's going to pay him, regardless of the cramping concerns, regardless of the injury concerns. I often say this in other sports, and you're seeing it in hockey. I don't know if we're going to be talking about Connor McDavid in his early 30s as someone that looks as though he's in his late 30s. When you are elite early in your life, the runway is not as long. This is very measurable in soccer.
Is that your theory?
This is my theory.
Yeah.
When you're someone like Wayne Rooney, for example, 18 superstar, 17, like already questionable, like debatably elite at 17 years old, 18 definitively. Record move, goes to Manchester United. He's England's leading scorer. He's done in his early 30s. And you could see the wheels falling off like at 30, right?
He had a lot of fun, though, didn't he?
He had a lot of fun, but I don't actually think it's that. I think it's, the LeBron, Messi, Brady, Ronaldo. These guys are exceptions that they can stay elite into their 30s. When you're that good, that young, the miles just, they clock up. They rack up a lot quicker.
I buy that.
Yeah. Well, time is a-ticking. We got lots more to get to on OverDrive. Don't go anywhere. This is OverDrive on TSN2, TSN Radio 1050, and the iHeartRadio app. They told me that Dua Lipa was in the Rolodex, and I'm positive this is Dua Lipa, right? Pretty sure. 99% sure. There we go. This is OverDrive. My name is Brendan Dunlop. Happy to be alongside Dave Feschuk. It's tennis time in Toronto, man.
Good time of year.
The National Bank Open is
always
here.
Fun to get up to York and check it out.
I mean, it's not fun to get up to York in traffic, but it is fun to get out there.
Take the TTC.
Take the TTC.
Well, that could be a little scary, too, at times.
There's a station there, though. It's great. I go to York United games up there, right outside of the station. It's well worth it. You're going to get some good tennis. Always do. Joining us on the line is Mike McIntyre, Canadian tennis journalist and co-host of Match Point Canada, the podcast. How you doing, Mike? Thanks for joining the show.
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, guys. And despite the traffic, otherwise, as you mentioned, it is the premier Canadian tennis event. Rafa Nadal took a helicopter once from the CN Tower to get to the site for his tennis practice when he got to town. So maybe we just need to find better travel accommodations, I guess, than driving on the 401.
Better transit options. I am surprised that more people haven't taken that up. Like Sao Paulo's like that. Just people flying around in helicopters to get around because it could be bothered with the traffic. But that would be a whole new level of bad traffic, my friend. This is a whole new level of tennis. We had the women's tournament in Toronto last year, the men's tournament this time around, but no Novak Djokovic. How disappointing is that for the tournament to not have him playing in TO?
Yeah, obviously it's a disappointment not to have him here when he's the last one of the big three that would be able to go anyways. I mean, Federer's retired. We know that. Many of us still, acclimatizing to a life on the ATP without Roger Federer. Nadal is hurt and out for the rest of this season. We hope he can come back next year, but that's not a guarantee either. So Djokovic is the only remaining piece of the big three, a big drawing card for tournaments in terms of selling tickets. And people want to see the greatest players of all time while they still can. So it's definitely a blow to the tournament. But then if you look at the glass half full, is who's coming up. And we already seem to have found that player in world number one, Carlos Alcaraz, who's only 20 years old, just won Wimbledon on a surface grass where he really hasn't been that comfortable up until this point. So we're seeing him learning so quickly. He's developing his game, and he's going to be the one to watch. He's playing Wednesday night here in Toronto. First appearance ever in our city. He wasn't even ranked high enough 2 years ago to get into this tournament, if you can believe it.
So the other draw, Mike, would be the Canadian contingent. And, we've all seen them, show great promise, maybe not have the results some would have expected of late. But if you had to pick one of the Canadian contingent, who would you pick to maybe go deep here?
Well, it's funny. If you had asked me an hour ago before the draw took place, I would have probably said Milos Raonic, which is a bit of a shock considering he's hardly played any tennis in the last 2 years. But that kind of speaks to the way that Felix Auger-Aliassime, unfortunately, has been struggling lately, losing 6 of his last 7 matches. Now the draws come out. I just finished that a short while ago. And Milos is going to be facing world number 9, Francis Tiafoe from the United States, not the matchup that Canadian tennis fans would have wanted to see him get in his return to his hometown tournament. He hasn't played here since 2019, so it's going to be a tough one for Milos. That being said, I saw him practice today against world number 3, Daniil Medvedev, and my goodness, that serve has not lost anything on the miles per hour measurement. It was just booming. Medvedev was at the far back of the court, almost sitting in the stands to give himself enough time to hit that thing back. And it was funny. The DJs were kind of trying out the sound system, and they had this really like soft classical music going. Meanwhile, you have these violent serves going by you. So it was like quite the contrast on center court today. But look, he's looking good. He's dropped 40 to 50 pounds to get back to playing shape, which is, quite an incredible amount of weight. Obviously, he's a big dude. He's 6'5", but he hasn't lost anything on the serve. We had him on Match Point Canada just this past week, gave a lot of detailed answers about what he did during that time off, how he got himself back into game shape. And what he said to us that struck me the most was he's not usually an emotional guy, but he does feel a lot of emotions coming back here to play in front of family, friends, and his parents, who haven't seen him play in over 4 years, actually.
It's crazy to think that Milos, had 40 or 50 pounds put on, and then, pre-retirement, and then would get to a point where he'd shed that to be competitive again. And am I right in hearing that he was on this one steak a day diet?
That's true. I don't know what cut of steak or where he was getting these steaks from. Like, was he grilling them himself on the barbecue?
Argentina, I would hope. If you're going to go that die hard, you got to go top shelf, top quality.
Were they coming on Uber Eats? I don't know, but I would imagine this kind of diet would be fun for maybe 3 days, maybe 4, and then after that, it would probably get old real quick. Milos admitted not something that he would recommend anyone to do, but that's what worked for him to shed those extra pounds. And he does look as fit as I've seen him, in many, many years. And I think he's taking this seriously. Like, he doesn't want to come back and just, wave to his family and friends up in his box. He wants to perform. And so I think he's going to give TFO, a good match. TFO's coming in from D.C., hopefully tired, and he's still in the tournament there. So I'm hoping he has a deep run there and tires himself out for this one. Either way, it's just great to see Milos back. He's planning on playing Cincinnati in the U.S. Open as well. And, God willing, if his body can hold up, hopefully a full season next year too, which would be great.
So, Mike, what do you make of the struggles of Felix, who obviously has shown so much promise, is only 22, but as you said, has been chewing on a lot of losses of late?
Yeah, I mean, we want to see that consistency from our young players like Bianca Andreescu, Leilani Fernandez, Denis Shapovalov, and Felix as well. But we got to remind ourselves, hey, they're really, really young still, right? These are all players between the age of 20 and 24, learning, what it's like to be consistent week in and week out. And I mean, the tennis tour is unlike almost anything in sports in that it goes pretty much 12 months of the year. There's no break. And when you're that age and you're acclimatizing to traveling the world on your own, it's a very individual sport too, obviously. I'm sure there's going to be some ups and downs, and that's what we're seeing from Felix right now. So he's in a stretch that's not working out so great, but he's got that talent. I was overhearing some top guys the other day on site say it's just a matter of time before he shakes out of it. I mean, he went on a stretch last fall where he won 3 consecutive tournaments in that European indoor swing. So the talent is definitely there. He's still ranked 12th in the world, so, there's nothing shabby about that. But what better place to get things going again would be here in Toronto on home soil in Canada for him. And he's drawn a qualifier in the first round, which means someone who's not ranked high enough to get directly into the main draw. So kind of the best case scenario, especially if you're struggling right now.
We're talking tennis with Mike McIntyre, co-host of the Match Point Canada podcast. I'll give you a couple of minutes on this, Mike. The state of Canadian tennis right now, where is it exactly?
This is the golden era of tennis in our country. And I mean, I grew up in the late 80s, early 90s. No offense to Daniel Nestor, fantastic player, did some great things in doubles, of course, for us, but we didn't have those singles players that were known, internationally. Nobody looked at Canada and said, hey, that's a tennis nation, right? When the tournament came to town in Toronto, or where I grew up in Montreal at Gerry Park, I was cheering for the Andre Agassi's or Boris Beckers or Steffi Grafs because we didn't have those type of players here in our country. And now it's just so exciting. Like, I got 3 young kids at home, and they look up to these guys. And when my boys are playing tennis in the backyard, one of them's Felix and one of them is Denis. And I think that speaks to where Canadian tennis has really come in the last 10 years. And kudos to Milos Raonic and Jeannie Bouchard as well, who had those great runs at Wimbledon and had those top 10 moments. They paved the way. And Felix and Denis have acknowledged they believe they could do it as young Canadians because they saw Milos and Jeannie doing it as well. And so even if we're in a period of time right now where for the past few months, maybe it's been a bit of a struggle for those players, I have no doubt that they're going to, reach great heights and have incredible careers, and that we are going to look back and say this was the best time Canadian tennis ever had.
Very well said, Mike. I enjoyed this tennis talk, man. Enjoy the National Bank Open. I know it'll be a busy week for you, but I look forward to doing this again.
And it's one of my favorite weeks of the year. Hope to see you guys there, and thanks for having me on.
Thanks, Mike. Mike McIntyre, Canadian tennis journalist and co-host of the Match Point Canada podcast. You can follow him on Twitter, McIntyre Tennis. Some good points, man.
Golden era.
It's it really does feel that way. I think in seeing the last few years, Layla getting close, Bianca getting close, obviously Felix and Dennis are at. There's a lot of potential.
Yeah.
But you see the injuries, which really derailed Jeannie Bouchard, which really derailed Milos Raonic, and I think that there's that fear. I wondered if that the answer that Mike gave there was going to be that answer, but good reason to be optimistic, and also too that these are the people at the top now. They're still contending, and there might be a few more down the pipeline behind them.
Yeah, I mean it's great to see so much potential, but yeah, I mean Felix is a guy that I'm kind of surprised has struggled the way he's struggled. But as Mike points out, 22 years old, still learning how to get around the world and figure it out. And look, he's right there. Like he gets to the fourth round in Australia. I think he was a first round out in the last two majors, but still got the U.S. Open, still got the hard court season here, and maybe he can turn it around.
Individual sport, it's a very, very different ball game. This is OverDrive on TSN2, TSN Radio 1050, and the iHeartRadio app.